NFL Week 1 has officially come and gone, so in today's video, let's talk about the 5 biggest losers of week number 1. So as I mentioned, I will be discussing the 5 biggest losers of week 1. Before we actually hop into the actual list, I do want to hand out one honorable mention. And that one honorable mention is going to be Kirk Cousins and the Atlanta Falcons. I've actually praised them a lot this offseason, but I was extremely disappointed with their first week performance. But the only reason why I don't have him on this list is because there's a lot of other people who are a bit more qualified for this list, and Kirk Cousins is coming off a torn Achilles, so I'm a little bit more understanding. But with that all said, if you guys go on to enjoy today's video, consider hitting the like and subscribe button. I'm going to be making content every single day of the NFL season, so let's hop into the list. Starting off at number 5 is going to be Will Levis of the Tennessee Titans, and in fact, you can just kind of include the entire Tennessee Titans roster here. Except for the defense, they played fantastic. The reason why the Titans are on this list is you had a Chicago Bears team that offensively put together one of the worst performances I've seen in quite some time. They had a total yardage of 148. Yet despite that, the Titans offense really couldn't do nothing outside of like the first quarter. They didn't really have impressive numbers either. They only had 244 total yards for the entire day. And in that second half, they were kept scoreless. And the part of this that makes it even worse for the Titans is their offense was so bad that they basically gifted the Chicago Bears the win because of turnovers and special team errors. You cannot put a single ounce of the blame on the Titans defense. They played fantastic, and to be honest with you, I don't even think you can put any of the blame on the head coach or any of the coaching staff. This was a game where the offense completely let down their team. They threw interceptions, they threw a pick six, they had a fumble lost. And of course, on special teams, probably the easiest part of the game that should just be all about operation, they have a blocked punt for a touchdown. On the day, Caleb Williams did not look good. He looked like a rookie quarterback, and the Titans defense did their job. Yet despite that, they still managed to lose, and they still managed to look really bad doing so. Now, I'm not going to write off the Titans quite yet because I do think their roster is still really talented, especially on the offensive end, but I see the flaws of the offensive line. The offensive line doesn't look good, and Will Levis, man, he's got to play more consistent. For him to look as good as he did early on and then have like the polar opposite in the second half, to me is inexcusable, especially for a sophomore quarterback who's trying to prove that he can be the full-time guy. But I will say I am going to give him the benefit of the doubt, give him some time, and maybe he could be the guy. Coming in at number 4 will be Deshaun Watson and the Cleveland Browns. This was an extremely disappointing game from the Browns on basically every end. We'll start off with the defense before we start hopping really directly into Deshaun Watson. I thought the defense was fine. They didn't really create turnovers or create too much havoc on Dak Prescott, especially when there was a couple young offensive linemen playing. So that was disappointing, but I thought they did their job. I mean, the offense did absolutely nothing to help their defense, yet I thought the defense still was okay. It wasn't good, don't get me wrong. It was not good, but I thought the defense was at least solid enough to get a win. Whereas the offense in this game was absolutely atrocious, and the big culprit here is Deshaun Watson. He was utterly garbage. Now, yes, you can make the excuse that he doesn't have Nick Chubb or he doesn't have most of his offensive linemen and he has a new offensive coordinator. You could say that, but there's no excusing some of the stuff when you actually sit down and watch the film. If you guys have not watched film on Deshaun Watson, I would suggest not because it's really ugly. But if you want to, just go on TikTok, look up Deshaun Watson sucks, and you'll probably find some highlights of him just missing wide open throws or just making very poor reads or having terrible poise in the pocket. And these are things that you could expect from a younger player like a Caleb or a Jaden Daniels or even a Will Levis. But we're talking about a guy who's been in the league for quite some time, and yeah, he's been struggling with injuries lately, but I don't think that's a really valid excuse. At the end of the day, when you're getting paid as much as he is, and when you have the talent on this team that they do have, you got to be able to perform at a somewhat high level. I think the writing on the wall was there for this Browns team to not win this game, but ultimately, I thought the defense put together an effort that could have kept this game somewhat close. But when you have a quarterback like Deshaun Watson who's playing like absolute trash, it doesn't help. Moving off of Watson, I thought the play calling was very unusual for the Browns. I didn't like the play calling much at all. The run game was very hit and miss. It wasn't really that consistent throughout the game. And of course, you can't talk about this game without talking about the offensive line. It was as bad as it gets. But I will also say, whenever Watson was given time in the pocket or whenever he was out in space or trying to make a play, he made the wrong play basically every time. And unlike the case for Will Levis, I don't actually know what the future is for the Browns and Deshaun Watson. This is becoming really scary. Moving on to number 3, we'll be discussing Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals. If you guys watched my reaction to every single game, which I'll have pinned up at the very end of the video, you guys would know a lot of the feelings I have about this game for the Cincinnati Bengals. I thought quite blatantly, this is an inexcusable loss that simply cannot happen to a team that should be making the playoffs this year. When you are a team that has stars like Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, the great offensive linemen they have, some of the good pieces defensively, there is quite literally no excuse to lose to a team in the Patriots that, quite simply put, is not a good team at this stage in the NFL. This is also a team that has been coached by the exact same guys the past couple years, and yes, you have a new offensive coordinator, but you're still Joe Burrow, you still have Zach Taylor, you still have most of your same guys, and you're losing to a team that has a new quarterback and a new head coach. I understand that they typically play bad in the beginning of the season, so am I that worried about their long-term success? No. But at the same time, this is a super unexcusable and, in my opinion, a disgrace of a performance for week 1. On the day, they only put up 224 total yards. Joe Burrow did not look good. He did not look comfortable behind the offensive line. He was just making very simple reads and was not pushing the ball down the field whatsoever. The team also had 2 fumbles lost, which is very unusual for them. And there was essentially no run game the entire day. I thought Zach Moss looked okay at times, but it wasn't that good overall. However, even all the issues they had with the run game, with some turnovers, you should still be able to put together at least 2 or 3 drives to beat this Patriots team. Hell, the final score was 16-10. This wasn't a game where the Patriots just happened to get hot and happened to score a couple touchdowns and the Bengals just had a shitstorm and they threw a bunch of picks. No, it was a grinded out type of game that perfectly would have went well for a good team. And I'm sorry, if you put a team like Kansas City or Buffalo or even Miami out there, they are winning this game. That's why this is an inexcusable loss for what I think is going to be a championship level team this year. I think you got to put blame on everyone in the organization, whether it's Joe Burrow, Jamar, the defense, and the coaching staff. This is a bad loss, and I am really frustrated with the Bengals, especially because I had Joe Burrow in fantasy. Moving on to number 2, I'll be discussing Daniel Jones and the New York Giants, mainly Daniel Jones here. Singling out Daniel Jones here, this was going to be a season where he was supposed to prove that he could be the future franchise quarterback of the New York Giants, and he did not look like that in the preseason, but you know, it was just the preseason, and everyone told me, just give him time. Let him build chemistry with his young players. Let the offensive line gel. And then this happens. On the day, he was 22 of 42 for 186 yards and 2 interceptions, one of them being a pick 6. And I'm not going to sit here and defend the entire team and just put this all on Daniel Jones. There's got to be a lot of blame thrown around here. The offensive line was terrible. The run game was god-awful. And again, outside of Malik Neighbors, nothing really going in the passing game. Shout out Wando Robinson. I saw him out there. He was pretty good. But Daniel Jones was just pathetic. He was just awful. And for a guy that's getting paid as much as he is, it's quite obvious that he is just not a starter in the NFL at this point, and he is getting paid like he's a potentially top 15 quarterback. So with all that being said, Daniel Jones has to be out. They can no longer go forward with him being the starting quarterback. I would give him maybe 2 more weeks. And if it doesn't work out, I'm throwing Drew Lock out there, and then in the offseason, I'm drafting a quarterback. But coming in at number 1, and you guys probably knew he was going to be here, it's Bryce Young, and it's the Carolina Panthers. I might go on a bit of a rant here, but I have been sitting here and telling you guys and kind of defending this team the entire offseason. And I want to make a bit of an apology for that because I have told you guys multiple times, hell, I even made a video that said the Panthers were going to be underrated this year. And then they did this, and it was as bad of a look as maybe my channel has ever had. By halftime, the score was 30-3, and it did not look better in the second half either. Their final score was 47-10, and Bryce Young looked terrible. Point simply put, he was god-awful. His first pass of the day was an interception. He would finish the day 13 for 30 for 161 yards and 2 interceptions. And yes, you could put the blame in the receivers. You can put the blame on the offensive line. You can put some of the blame on the coaching staff. But when you are the number 1 overall pick, when you are somebody who everyone has expectations for, you have to be better than this. I'm not saying he had to go out there and put together a good game, but you have to at least make these games respectable, my guy. Your defense is probably the worst defense in the NFL. I'm not going to put that on Bryce Young. He was awful, but that defense was even worse. The defense gave up 47 to a team team in the New Orleans Saints that I don't think is that good. But even despite that, even if the defense was this bad and even if the game was a blowout, if the Panthers had scored like 24 and Bryce finished with like 200 yards and a touchdown and maybe one interception, I don't think he's on this video. Because at that point, maybe you're putting the defense on this video, which maybe I should talk about a bit more. But given the fact that your offense put up 10 points in a blowout and you threw 2 interceptions, both of them completely inexcusable, it's a bad look, and you deserve to be on the video. I don't want this to be a hit piece on Bryce. I'm a big fan of Bryce Young. I loved him coming out of college. I did have CJ above him coming out of college, but I still thought he was a second or third best in that class. And I'm still going to sit here and defend the guy and say that he deserves at least a bit more time to develop, but this right here is about as bad as it gets. Now, going off of Bryce Young real quick, defensively, horrific, god-awful. JC Horn was talking shit when they were down like 30. Derek Brown, I think, is out for the season, so this defense is quite possibly going to be historically bad. But you guys let me know if I missed anyone in the comment section below, and if you guys did enjoy, hit the like and subscribe button. But I love you guys. Peace.